Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me. Today what I'm going to do is rank the pop eras of 2024. So I've got a bunch of albums that were released this year, and I'm going to put them into my tier system to figure out who were the best of the year and which ones needed a little bit of work. Now this has something to do with the quality of the album, but it has to do with the era as a whole as well. So music videos, touring, promotion, the public perception of it, critical reviews, all of it. So this is not necessarily an indication of what my favorite albums were of the year. That list is going to come later in the week. For now, we're just going to focus in on the era as a whole. And I've got a lineup of albums here. First up, if you like content just like this, I would love it if you would subscribe. Let's get started and rank these albums. Also, if you disagree with any of them, that's fine. Sound off in the comments and let's talk about it some more. Let's start off with an easy one, actually. Let's go with Billie Eilish's Hit Me Hard and Soft, which I felt was just a perfect era as a whole. I thought the album was really good. I thought her execution was amazing. I think the tour is really successful. She's had 3 big singles off the album already. I don't know if you could ask for any more. So I have to put Hit Me Hard and Soft in perfect. And I think that it is her best era yet. I think that it's taken her to heights that maybe the others didn't. And it feels like the most uniquely Billie Eilish album. So I'm pretty confident with that in perfect. Let's go next with Gracie Abrams' The Secret of Us, which is an interesting one. For me, I like half of this album. The other half I don't think is super successful, but it's also been a massive breakthrough for her. And I don't think you can argue that. She's having such a huge moment. That's So True is a massive song right now. I Love You, I'm Sorry also broke through. Close to You, it was also a Billboard Hot 100 hit. So while I don't necessarily love this album, it's really difficult to say that the era is not successful for her. So I'm going to put The Secret of Us into a creative win, which I guess for me is the category that just kind of shows that it was a win for the artist and a step up for them, without being the whole package in terms of being a Grammy-winning album, which I think is what separates Hit Me Hard and Soft from The Secret of Us. Let's go next with Brat because that's an easy one. It's going into perfect. Charli XCX started off the year as not really a commercial mainstream mainstay at all, and Brat elevated her to a level that I don't think any of us were predicting this year. It is now Grammy nominated. She's had Billboard Hot 100 hits. Everybody wants a bit of everyone wants a piece of the Bratosphere, and the remix album kind of showed that with being able to get Ariana Grande on a remix is just something she wouldn't have been able to do before 2024. So it's pretty obvious to me that Brat ends up in perfect. One that's not so obvious is Normani's Dopamine, which I think when she dropped the album cover for this, it was a very exciting moment. We were finally, Normani is going to give us something and come through. And then for some reason, the promotion of it has just been so lackluster. Basically nothing done to promote this album. And I don't know if that's an issue with the record label or the management or what is going on. But to me, Dopamine is a good album. It's actually one of my most listened to albums of the year. But in terms of promotion, this thing needed work to get it across the line. Let's go next with Camila Cabello's CXOXO, which is an album that definitely got the promotion and faced a lot of backlash. There was a lot of claims that she was copying Charli XCX. They're not claims that I co-sign. I think that CXOXO was a pretty successful album in terms of taking her into a different realm. It didn't feel like she was so reliant on having a big hit, where previous albums have been so pop-based that she almost needed to have a huge hit to sell it. This one feels like a win for her in the way that she did something different to anything she's done in her career. I think there are some really successful moments on it. I think there's some not so successful moments on it. But in terms of her, this is difficult because commercially it is a step down. You can't deny that. But creatively, it's a step up for her. I'm going to put it into a creative win. I think that it was successful for her. Let's go with Kendrick Lamar, GNX. Massive hip hop moment. I think this year for him has just been groundbreaking. We don't even need to like bring up the feud because he ends the year with like a really triumphant album doing incredible numbers. It has hits on it. It's got to be imperfect. Let's go with Ice Spice's Y2K. Ice Spice started this year as kind of like a massive, massive prospect for the year. She announced Y2K, if I'm correct, like very early in the year, maybe even the 1st of January. And coming off the back of like collaborations with Taylor Swift, like she was very kind of promoted throughout the Grammys and the award season last year. It felt like she had so much hype around her. And Y2K just did not deliver on that at all. It came and went extremely quickly. It basically, considering how previous EPs have gone, particularly her first EP was just like such a massive moment and such a breakthrough for her, to then come up and squander it with Y2K, I think is disappointing. And I don't think anybody like on her team or on the label would really like debate that either. So I'm putting Y2K into a step down for her. Next up, let's go with Ariana Grande's Eternal Sunshine. This is an album that has 2 number 1 singles. It was her first time releasing an album in 3 years. It's obviously been a very important year for Ariana, with Wicked coming through as well. And obviously Wicked's been such a success for her and kind of ends off the year with Ariana being one of the biggest names on earth right now. And I wonder if that's why Eternal Sunshine feels kind of slight in comparison. Despite its obvious success, it seems to be being kind of ignored when it comes to the end of year lists and when it comes to the Grammys as well, which is kind of confusing because I think it's a good album. It's her Return to Max Martin album. There are definite hits on there. It's very personal. It's very vulnerable. But the thing that stops me from putting it imperfect is it just feels like it's been kind of forgotten through not even lack of promotion. It just feels like the interest has kind of dwindled, but I can't put it in needs work. I've got to put it in a creative win for her. Glorilla, glorious. Glorilla to me has had a real breakthrough year. I think that last year was kind of interesting for her. She failed to capitalize on the success that she was having in 2022. But this year she's just turned it around massively. She's got Billboard Hot 100 hits. This album was pretty well reviewed. I think it's a really successful album in terms of like really positioning her as a rapper that could be around for many years. And the sales were great. This was in a year where we had records from Megan Thee Stallion and Ice Spice, and then we had Nicki Minaj's Pink Friday 2 at the end of last year. This is the one that's really memorable to me, and I think that's super impressive. So I'm going to put this in a creative win for her as well. Taylor Swift's The Tortured Poets Department. This is a really interesting one. At the time of recording, this is the number 1 album in the US because she's released the physical version of the anthology. It spent an incredibly long time at number 1 and kind of coincides with a tour that is one of the most successful in history. Creatively, though, is where this one kind of dwindles a little bit. And I think it's too long for starters. And I think that was a real put off for people who are outside of the Swiftie universe. Obviously, the Swifties are going to kind of eat up anything she does. And I have to admit, I think there's a really, really good album in here. There's like at least 13 excellent songs on the Tortured Poets Department. But as a whole thing, it just feels like Taylor Swift needs to like be edited in some kind of way. The output has been so huge over the last couple of years, and it's because she keeps winning. And commercially, this album is a win, but it also failed to create like a really memorable single moment, whereas Midnight's had Anti-Hero, and I guess you can also argue Karma as well. So I feel like I need to put this in needs work because as much as the Swifties will argue that this is perfect, and I do think there isn't a perfect album in here, I do think that it needed some editing and it needed a really like incredible moment to really kick it off as well. Casey Musgrave's Deeper Well, I think that this was a course correction for her. Starcross wasn't received incredibly well. And that was coming off the back of Golden Hour, which was an Album of the Year winner. So she had some work to do in this, and I think she did the right thing. She took it back to basics. This is an album that really relies on songwriting. It's a simple album, but it's a really sweet album in my opinion as well. I'm going to go with a creative win for this one. Chromacopia, Tyler, the Creator. One of my favorite albums of the year. I think that he just continues to show that his vision is so singular and so strong that like winning at this point is going to happen on every single album because he's just so concise, I think, in the way that he delivers what he wants to say. This is an album that's like not sprawling by any sense, but it feels major and it feels widescreen. And also in terms of sales, puts him up there with people like Kendrick Lamar and Drake, which 5-10 years ago would have been impossible to imagine mentioning Tyler, in those kind of spaces, which I think is really cool. So I think this is an almost faultless campaign. I'm going to put it in perfect. The next one is Katy Perry's 143. It just went wrong from almost the first minute. Woman's World was obviously not the kind of return they were hoping for her. And then the news of the collaborator came out, public opinion really turned. And by the time this album arrived, it was almost already dead in the water. The critics really hated it. It sold okay in the first week and then has almost managed to create no memorable moment at all. Lifetimes as a single did okay, but the streaming numbers are like not impressive whatsoever. This was meant to be the return of Katy Perry, and it was something I was excited about in the lead up. I think that this year of like escapist, euphoric pop music that people like Sabrina Carpenter have given us is really owed to Katy Perry's brand of pop. That's what she created with Teenage Dream. And she just wasn't able to deliver what she needed to with this album, which I think is a shame. And I think in terms of PR and in terms of sales, it's hard to argue that it was anything but a disaster for her, unfortunately. Let's go next with Benson Boone with an album that I've got to check the name of, Fireworks and Rollerblades. Benson obviously had a massive hit this year, one of the biggest hits of the year, and he's one of the biggest breakthrough names as well. I think that this album, for me, doesn't do enough in terms of really proving his individuality. I think it's very tied to like sort of arena rock bands like U2 and Coldplay. But I do think that he has a phenomenal voice and he has a really great stage presence. He's now nominated for Best New Artist at the Grammys. It's a win for him for sure. Tyler, similarly to Benson Boone, has been a massive breakthrough this year. Water, huge hit, massive viral moment for her. But what I'm impressed by is she's kind of been able to maintain her presence without having another hit as big as Water. This album's really impressive. It's a really good listen. It's really cohesive in terms of the sound. She has a very good idea of who she is as an artist, and she keeps proving that over and over. The visuals have been really tight. This is a win for me. I keep putting things in win now. Looking at this, has been a really good year for pop. And we all knew that anyway. Radical Optimism, Dua Lipa. This is an album that I like, actually. I think it's a good listen. I think that there are great moments on there. I just think that the rollout was a little bit confusing. The way that she talked about it as this kind of psychedelic pop record and kind of said that it was a little bit deeper. And I do think there are deeper moments on here, like Happy For You. But by and large, this is kind of another escapist album. And I just wonder if maybe if it was positioned more as like a summer vacation record, it would have been received a little bit better. I feel like Illusion should have led it as the first single. I think that that's the like one that could have been eaten up by the general public the best, and then kind of gone a little bit more challenging with what she gave out after that. Given that Future Nostalgia was the juggernaut that it was, it's difficult to argue that this like wasn't a step down for Dua Lipa, commercially anyway. I feel like creatively she probably feels like this was a win for her, and I would probably agree that it shows that she's extending herself. I don't think I can comfortably say it was a step down though. I think I've just got to put it in needed work. Next up, we've got Sabrina Carpenter's Short and Sweet. This has been like a phenomenal year for her. The critics love Short and Sweet. The general public loves Short and Sweet. It's had, at this point, 3 singles, huge singles. I would say 2 other songs in Beg, Chem and Juno that are heading that way as well. She's comfortably solidified herself as one of the most important pop figures right now. I think it's hard to say that this just wasn't a perfect era for her. It was the breakthrough that she needed and more. It's taken her from being like a really underrated artist bordering in flop territory to being a solidified superstar. Beyonce's Cowboy Carter. This is hard for me because I love this album. I think that it is excellent and I've really enjoyed listening to it front to back this year. I think that it is so good. And I think every time she delivers a project like this, she executes the vision with a level of depth and complexity that no other pop artist can match her on. But after it was dropped, it's just kind of been silent. And the album's dropped from the Billboard 200, or I think it's back in it this week, but mostly has been absent over the past couple weeks. She had a number 1 single in Texas Hold'em. It was off to a really, really strong start. And then she just hasn't really tried to promote it anymore, which I think it's really difficult to say. But in terms of the PR execution of this album and in terms of the marketing of this album, it needs work. So if I'm going to put Taylor in needed work, I've got to put her in needed work as well. Although when it comes to my best albums of the year, it's going to be a very different story. Ending with Halsey's The Great Impersonator. This is also a difficult one to rank because I think that creatively this is a bit of a win for her. I think that it's definitely one of her deepest projects to date. I personally found my first listen to it to be an incredibly like heart-rendering experience, but I haven't really gone back to it, and the numbers show that not many people have gone back to it either. And this is somebody who was like for a moment just churning out hits like no other. But over the past 2 projects, she's kind of put her eggs in the basket of trying to do something that's creatively fulfilling for her and kind of ignoring the like general public or how they're going to perceive it, which I think is smart. But there are moments that she goes into that and she's definitely trying to get a hit and they just kept missing. Like Lucky wasn't able to convert into a hit. And because of that, this album just hasn't had the weight that I think it needed to be to successfully sell the vision. So I feel like this is also an album that needed work for me. I think I'm happy with that. Let me just have a revision across it. Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of showcases what was going on with each of the artists. I feel weird about having Taylor Swift in needed work, but I do think that in order to keep to the level that she has experienced over the last couple years, she needs to shake something up. And this list is all relative to where the artists were before this project as well, because obviously when you look at the numbers, the Tortured Poets department is more successful than Brat, for example. But Midnights was way more successful than Crash was for Charli XCX, which kind of explains why we end up with this sort of ranking. I'm interested to know where you would put everything in the comments. I will come back at the end of the week with my best albums of 2024 list, so hit subscribe if you want to see that. Otherwise, let's chat in the comments.